Welcome to Bound and Beyond, brought to you by Insurance Journal. Bound and Beyond is a new podcast series exploring the people, the capital, and the technology shaping the future of the insurance industry. Across each episode, we'll bring you candid conversations with the investors, operators, founders, and product builders who are actively defining what comes next in property and casualty, specialty, and the technology stack running underneath all of it. This series is produced in partnership with Bound AI and OIP InsurTech and hosted by AJ Bajatovic. AJ, over to you.
Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of the Bound and Beyond podcast, partnered with Insurance Journal. So I'm very happy to present the two guests we have today. We have our familiar face from last episode, Mladen Subasic, and to welcome Trent Somerville, who is a senior leader at Ardona. And what we'll get here is a lot of interesting takes from the broker position in the London market, and then Mladen's positioning as a tech services provider for not only on the underwriting side, but also automating a lot of those very key workflows. So Trent, starting with you, looking over your resume, you have a very interesting way of how you got to insurance. So you went from control units, fuel injection software at Delphi, which I believe was General Motors at the time, then working for platforms at Willis Tower Watson before leading to Ardona around 7 years ago. So that's automotive, banking, then insurance. So what was the moment specialty insurance went from being just the next job to being the thing you actually wanted to spend your career on?
Yeah, I think like everyone falls into insurance, right? And then stays forever. That's like the joke that goes around the market. But yeah, I think it's very true from my experience. Like what ties together all the previous industries I've worked for is essentially control engineering. Yeah, you've got an input, and you want a very specific output. And in automotive, that's very, very tightly governed and controlled. You put your foot on that accelerator, you only want to go so fast. And similar in banking, where it was you put an order on the market, you wanted to know that had been executed. So it's very tight, and there's a high level of trust there. As there's a lot of water under the bridge. But when I moved across to insurance, what interested me was on the surface is it looked exactly like that. This should all be quite straightforward, but as you dig into it, it's absolutely not the case, because every case, is an edge case. And what has kept me interested is, as you're looking at these problems from the point of view of a technologist, they're not problems that another technologist has been picking over for decades. There's only tiny little improvements you can make. But the opportunity to make a real change and a real difference is huge. And that's what's keeping me around.
Yeah, you couldn't have picked a more ambiguous work of business than specialty insurance, especially coming from banking.
Yeah, literally. But the London market does absolutely insure everything under the sun. And every day I hear about some other risk that's insured. I'm genuinely surprised that that's an insurable risk.
Yeah, exactly. And then throw it over to you, Mladen. You have also quite the interesting career path in the sense that you grew from project manager on the OIP InsurTech side all the way to chief product officer, and recently, from what you've been telling me, you've been working on your PhD in trustworthy, incredible AI. So what's something you've learned from one side of that work that's changed how you do the others, particularly with this recent studies that you've been doing on that PhD side?
Yeah, I think it's just research just flexes the muscle of actually validating what you think the truth is, and that's super useful in all the noisy kind of a world we live in today. I'll come back to one of the things that Trent said, but insurance is a really good place if you like working with data and complexity. So, but there is also trust is a huge component of what people in insurance are actually operating on, and it's really hard earned. In order for a system of any kind to get into their day-to-day, organization can put many tools in front of underwriters. We're now talking about these underwriting workbenches, these new kind of ways to price the risk real time. But underwriters will use it only and only if they can trust it. And I spoke about this a couple of times. The biggest surveys we ran with our customers and brokers, trust was one thing that is actually blocking them from doing more with these new technologies, because it's not even them being replaced, it's how can I trust to make a good decision. So that sparked my interest a lot, and that's why the way that we are crafting the systems, they need to be reliable for people. And what does that mean is how is the actual decision authority built into the process, because large language models are not great at it. So that's actually what we have been kind of tinkering with lately on the product side and on the research side. So I think that's where we are today.
And when mentioning trust, I mean, I feel like there's two ways to look at it, in the sense that trust of obviously the AI and managing hallucinations, but it's also trust in a partner as well that can actually facilitate those sort of digital transformations. So Trent, from your side as a specialty broker, when you're looking at finding partners, what are those key details you look for, just looking at their insurance competency, and how they could support building what you need to get built on that specialty broking side?
Yeah, first thing that comes to mind is flexibility and being really, really light on their feet. A lot of the big SaaS providers, where as a business you need to do it their way to use their tech, have really failed to get their teeth into specialty insurance. And the reason for that is the nuances in process within the brokers and a lot of the carriers as well, how they approach the transfer of risk is actually part of their value. Like if everyone just ubiquitized to doing it the same way, that there's no USP left. I think it's why it's been really important to work with vendors that understand the specialty market. They've got years on the ground and are able to flex their solution to suit what you need or what we need.
Yeah, I think that custom build and any sort of SaaS discussion is almost inevitable for partnering with anybody in that specialty insurance line, from being a broker to a carrier. And that really leads into the next question that I had. And so the two of you have been working together on real specialty insurance technology, not just slides, but actual production. So what's the thing you've learned together about getting into technology, and about the market that you didn't fully appreciate before you really got your hands dirty?
For me, that it was that the process can start from any point in the process, anytime, and each run through the process is different. I think when I come into this, you think the logical place is to start is at the beginning, and you start to design along that, and then you learn that a risk can come along that needs to be placed. It can have all the data, or it can have virtually none of the data. It can have some other elements that you weren't expecting. And any tech solution that's rigid, that enforces a certain way of working, a certain number of linked steps, like old school workflow, it ends up being more effort to the user than their previous manual way. And if something's too much effort, you lose them, then your adoption goes, and that's the pathway to failure.
Here's your thoughts, Martin.
Yeah, I'll just take the last part of what Trent just said. And I think, Trent, I can pretty confidently say that I learned this from you back in the days when we started doing these projects together, is the adoption and then the adoption and the adoption. So what that means is, Trent once said, is you need to bring the business for the ride, right? If you cannot, you will be implementing rigid systems, you will be implementing custom solutions, you'll be integrating them all together. There is a lot of work in an insurance process, and having all those things work for the actual customers, that's the craft and that's the science. So what that means is, today we will have technologies which are much more moldable, that can follow the way that the broker wants to do the work, because the way of work is their secret sauce. So all technologies that are moving to the specialty lines need to acknowledge that. And the abstraction is the most difficult thing to accomplish in technology. But I think it's table stakes in this industry. So if we just have that mindset of being humble towards the complexity of the space and understanding what will actually make traction for the people who are conducting the work, then we can really create value for the brokers, for the underwriters. And it's very important that whatever is being built to completely get the underwriter or broker out of the chain, I don't think it's viable in any near future. So those kind of heuristics help when you're designing for the space.
Yeah, and I think that common saying is table stakes when talking about certain parts of technology. Particularly, I just recently read this Lloyd's Market Association data that says three-quarters of firms in the market are using AI to read documents, but when they really looked into it, only 1 in 7 has it inside the actual underwriting workflows where they're executing on that data to an extent. So when hearing that, what's the gap between we can extract data from a submission, let's say like a court application or any of your standardized documents, and we've changed how work gets done in this portion of the workflow? I feel like those are two very different things.
They very much are. And what we've learned, I think, as an industry over the last 2 years is AI technology is good at extracting data from random documents, which is what you see when a submission comes to London. Like I describe it as an email bomb. It'll be an email that's come in. It might have 10 to 15 different attachments, and somewhere in there is the 50 or 100 bits of data that we really care about, that the underwriter really cares about, that we need to be able to explain to the underwriter, this is the actual risk, and that trust thing comes in again. Like, do we 100% trust that describes the risk, and therefore the underwriter can make their decision? But it's easy enough to pull that out now, but it's not really driving change unless something happens autonomously after that. So you pulled it all out from a bunch of emails, and now you've just copied it into a Word document and mailed it off. So what? We haven't really taken things forward. But where we're really starting to see change is because we're starting to trust that AI extraction. We can plug workflow steps that are automated, or we can plug direct integrations into platforms, and you can see events, so call them, so maybe quotes or creation of documents happening in seconds to minutes that previously were taking hours to days. So to generate real change, it's about having AI extracted data you can trust, and then having a platform you can use to automate the next steps, but maintaining trust while you're doing these three things.
Yeah, and that email bomb phrase I'm going to start using on all my future calls. So I'll take that trademark out of your book. I'm curious to hear what you think of that, Mladen.
Yeah, Trent, what AJ probably didn't tell you is throughout these podcasts, we take the best lines out of our partners and run with it. So yeah, I think we are now solving at this data availability problem at scale. And that's a big problem, right? For brokers, it's these complex submissions that have everything in it, from large schedules all the way to kind of bespoke documents that describe the business. There are like these app packages. There's a lot that's coming in. For Trent, it's worldwide. Just coming to think about understanding what's the actual risk. But that part, we are kind of moving the needle further and further, and we are ready to kind of proclaim that problem has been kind of solved. But then after that, we have this decision and accountability problem as well. And back to what Trent said, when you inject that into the systems who can then inform decision and then automate the process, you need to capture that back. You need to understand why the decision was made, so you can feed that back into the system that knows now kind of why something was done rather than just following the data trace. I think that's super important to bring that back into the process, and that's how we will be able to trust the system. It needs to be audible. It needs to be connected. So anywhere from routing, appetite checks, referrals, all the way to claims, that becomes a single ontology problem now. And decisions need to be recorded and known. So now you're ready to actually make the moves and push that AI bit to the front line and to be really useful for the broking and underwriting teams.
Yeah, and I'd love to double click on that auditability and trustworthiness. It seems like this has been a pretty much the key topic for today's call. Mladen, I mean, your research is obviously in trustworthy AI. Trent, you're the person accountable when AI gets deployed inside regulated environments. So trust is clearly not theoretical for either of you. So what does trustworthy, auditable AI actually mean inside a specialty insurance workflow? What does it have to do? And just as importantly, what does it have to refuse to do as well?
Yeah, it's a good question and something that we're grappling with at the moment. I broadly look at it as two types of AI, probabilistic, a lot of the commercial models that we hear about, and then deterministic AI. And if we're talking about pricing or the execution of risk transfer, we're going to need a deterministic solution. And what I mean by that is no matter which way you process through the model, you always get that same answer. There's a lot to be said about how knowledge graphs might be used in this space. But in the pricing area, it's going to have to be there. It's going to have to be fully auditable and 100% deterministic before that can really be put to bed. There's a little bit more latitude in the earlier stages of extraction or comparison or enriching, but that's okay to be probabilistic because it's just like having an extra member of your team. But when we get to that pricing and risk transfer moment, it's going to have to be rock solid and deterministic.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think this is it's a very interesting topic, and I think where things will either win or fail is actually there is a lot of AIs out there. The models themselves are multi-models, and as Trent said, when you are matching the use case with what AI technology you will use, there is this default now to just use the hyperscaler model and some agents to do the work. And then the error gets propaginated. And then eventually you end up with a very discrete you are decreasing the quality. And also you have a ghost in the machine somewhere where you don't know where it is. That's not going to cut it for this pricing, portfolio, algorithmic, real-time things. So what I want to say is I think it's very, very important to understand that this is just one of the technologies, and there is a lot of flavors to it. So we really need to understand which AI deployment does what, which AI paradigm is suitable for which insurance use case, and be very clear when reporting back to our business partners on what they can expect from it. Because people are kind of disoriented today. They think there is this one thing that will solve for everything. To Trent's point, there is a place for graph technologies. There is a place for large language models. There is a place for deterministic and tool calling. So the fine art is actually putting the right technology to the right place. And that hasn't changed at all. But you need to really go deep on these AI technologies and understand them to their core in order to be successful with it. And move that kind of a needle fully. That's the whole idea.
So circling back to, we did a great job of discussing the trustworthiness, auditability. What I really wanted to focus on as well is this huge gap in, let's call it, talent. So when I looked at the London Market Group research prior to this call, hiring fell 18% last year. They're projecting under 30s will go from a quarter of the workforce to just 7% by 2034. I feel like a lot of these numbers could be pretty debatable here. So what does that mean for what specialty technology actually has to do? And is the generation of tools going to be teaching us as much as automating? What does that look like for new grads getting into insurance?
We could be here all day on this one. The way I look at it is this is the third big wave of tech change that's come through, like computers in the 60s and 80s, the internet, like late 90s, 2000s, and now we've got this AI automation era. Like the first wave through computing, it just took out a lot of the junk work, right? So there was a reduction in a lot of the clerical effort that went on. Then we moved on to the internet, and that gave us a lot of ability to scale. But that sort of created some new jobs that sat around it. But what we need to figure out is AI just another one of these phases where we're going to see an increase in productivity? But whereas like the early computing, it took out the clerical roles. Is it like that? Is that what we're seeing? We're just seeing all the junior roles come out, and there'll be a future phase that'll come through like the internet did after computing that'll push us forward and create a lot of the roles that don't exist now. I think it's a very difficult problem to solve, and that's sort of very future looking. But the reality of the hollowing out is happening right now. So I think before we get out the magic 8 ball to what was figure out what is going to happen longer term, there's a need to kind of act. And I think the right thing to do is we're going to have to leave space for graduates coming through, and probably a slightly bigger space than everyone's comfortable with, given the savings targets that have been flouted around. But like that's my very personal take on that, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer at the moment. This is all very new.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think we could be here for maybe 2 hours and still have no proper conclusion on the right answer for that question. But Mladen, I'm sure you got an interesting take here, so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Oh, this is probably where I'm worse at. It's really difficult to conclude how do we nurture and kind of bring the next generation of talent when so much of the work gets commoditized or we are kind of completely abstracted. So what I say is, if there is a way for organizations to treat AI not just as an automation journey, but also to be kind of to track and trace the work and then give that as a learning surface to teams who are supporting the people who are doing the work. So let's say a large broker has a team of account executives or brokerage assistants who are sitting next to him. If we have systems who can reverse engineer the decisions, when something is being bound and placed, then there are like 3 similar cases and why the decision was made. That is a learning surface. If you can query the information in your knowledge base and get that to a training platform for people who are just getting on board, it will actually expedite their learning rate. But if we are just extrapolating the work and people are just pushing buttons and getting the work done, that's really going to leave a big gap in the talent in this industry. We are already 30% understaffed, right? With the proper talent. If we keep expanding that gap, these LLMs and technologies which are mostly used are pretty simple. As much as they see, and they serve that back to you in multiple ways. If they haven't seen something, if there is something that is outside of their scope, there is no true innovation. There is nothing that it can do. So what we are actually proposing here is organizations should think about learning and automation at the same time and do not come back to this topic 5 years from now.
Yeah, so a lot to digest there. And I mean, me personally, just thinking as somebody that has got into insurance recently, it's been a huge help in accelerating my knowledge and being able to prepare for example, discussions like these. I think a lot of that free thinking, sort of entrepreneurial spirit of people that are going to be able to leverage that existing knowledge that it could feed to you is going to be at least the sort of mindset to have when thinking about these sort of technologies. So to close us out, the people listening to this, that are running technology shops, building products, sitting on underwriting desks, leading their businesses across the market. If you could give them one thing to do differently before Monday, whether it's a way of thinking or just a small task, what would that be to set them up for success?
I think everyone needs to be looking at every task and just genuinely asking, can AI do this? And then it's for leaders to be then looking at that list and going, should AI do this? And I think the gap of those two, or if something passes through both of those tests, I think that needs to be top of everyone's agenda. That'd be my ask for everyone.
Yeah, I would just put more weight to what Trent is saying for the audience out there. Trent is a really true technologist, which means he puts all technologies through scrutiny, and he put a lot of ideas that we had through scrutiny over the years. So that carries a lot of weight that the AI should be considered really, really closely. What I would say is what we saw in our projects recently, and Trent, you can maybe add to this, but as we are exposing now kind of what AI needs in order to do the work, we are surfacing up workflows which are going across systems, and then there's a lot of challenges there. And then there is an organizational problem where teams are actually, technology teams get into one room, business team gets into another, process improvement into a third, and they're just talking in silo what happened, like what led to this, without being proactive and getting everybody in the room. So what I would suggest is take a process, which is most painful, get everybody in the room and surface out all the problems. Don't run away from them or point fingers. Just think about how that process should be rebuilt. Change the lens of everybody in that room. Forget what was happening before. Think about how can this be completely digitalized in a new paradigm of software. Bring it to pilot and bring it to life. Everybody will follow. But just being kind of not candid about this, not surfacing the entire process out, just going to delay the wins. And Trent, maybe you can close on this one, your perspective.
Yeah, there's a real risk with AI is it just makes shit stuff go faster. I think that's the message you're trying to give, and I agree. There's an opportunity just to clean the whiteboard and look at this as a true process re-engineering moment and figure out where AI fits. Like that's the right way of going about it. I'm completely on board. Like we've had a couple of initiatives where we went in assuming it was going to be an AI transformation, cleaned the whiteboard down, and in the end actually found a solution that didn't involve AI that was a lot more efficient. But just because we had that opportunity, given that the environment we're in. So I can give some real examples of where that's played out.
And that has to be an acceptable and viable answer.
Yeah.
Because not everything is not everything is AI. So that's a good closing of this.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for attending the second episode of the Bound and Beyond podcast, and hope everybody listening has a great rest of their day and learned some interesting things today. So thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.